Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is the 7th straight year that I get to speak in CPAC, and it reminds me of the first year that I was here. The year was 2010. I, at the time, was an underdog candidate for the United States Senate. My opponent was the sitting governor of Florida. His name was Charlie Crist. I know that's what I said at the time, too. But no one would listen. It was a time when the conservative movement was being told that we needed to become more like the Democrats. It was in the aftermath of 2008. Barack Obama had won, and we were told that the only path forward was to become more like them, to moderate our message, to moderate our stances, to basically be less conservative. I never believed that at the time, and so I chose to run, and it was a difficult race. At the beginning of that race, the only people that thought I had a chance to win all lived in my home. And 4 of them were under the age of 10. The entire Republican leadership in Washington, D.C. was with him. And everything I knew about politics said there was no path forward. But it didn't matter to me at the time, because I believed deeply that if America continued on the road that the new president had put us on, we would lose the things that made it a special country and the place to change the history of my family. You fast forward 7 years to this moment, things have only gotten worse. We've only gotten further and further away from the principles that made America the greatest nation in all of human history. And it brings us to this moment in our history now. The election of 2016 is no longer simply a choice between political parties or even ideologies. The fundamental question before America right now is, what kind of country is this going to be in the 21st century? The thing that I always enjoy about CPAC is the incredible number of young people that come to these. Younger Americans. And by younger, I mean anyone under 44. Although I feel 45 this week because I've had the flu, but anyway. Thank you. And what we ask ourselves in this campaign is, what is this country going to look like? What will it look like when my 16-year-old daughter graduates from college? What will it look like when my 13-year-old daughter starts her first business? Or my 10-year-old son starts his family? Or my 8-year-old son buys his first home? I can tell you what it's going to look like if we stay on the road we're on right now. They will be the first Americans, you will be the first Americans, that inherit from a previous generation a country worse off than the one that was left for your parents. That is the road that we are headed on now. And if we remain on this road, we will have to explain why our children and grandchildren did not inherit what we did. To get off of this road, we must re-embrace the principles that made us the greatest nation to begin with. And that's why the theme of this gathering, Our Time Is Now, forces us to answer a second question, and that is, what does it mean to be a conservative in the 21st century? I can tell you what it can never mean. Being a conservative can never be about simply an attitude. Being a conservative cannot simply be about how long you're willing to scream, how angry you're willing to be, or how many names you're willing to call people. That is not conservatism. Conservatism has never been about fear or about anger, not at its best. Do people have a right to be fearful of the future right now? Yes. Because for over 2 decades, leaders in neither party have solved the problems before us. Do people have a right to be angry about not just the political class, but every institution in society? Absolutely. But neither anger nor fear will solve our problems. It can serve to motivate us, but it will not solve our problems. What will solve our problems is a specific set of ideas built on bedrock principles that made America the greatest nation to begin with, and applying those principles to the unique challenges of this new century. And those principles are not complicated. It begins with the notion that this nation was founded on a powerful spiritual principle, that our rights do not come from government, our rights do not come from our laws, our rights do not come from our leaders, our rights come from God. Our government does not exist to decide these rights, nor to grant them. Our government exists to protect them. And that is why we have a constitution that limits the power of the federal government to a few specific but important things. And we have abandoned that. We have abandoned it in both political parties. We have reached a moment in our history where we think that every problem in America has to have a federal government solution. Every problem in America does not have a federal government solution. In fact, most problems in America do not have a federal government solution, and many of them are created by the federal government to begin with. And so to move forward in a better direction, it does mean re-embracing and following the First Amendment. For what that stands for is not just the right to believe anything you want, but the right to live out the teachings of your faith in every single aspect of your life. It means understanding that the Second Amendment was not a nice suggestion. It is a constitutional right to protect yourself and your families from terrorists or criminals. It means adhering to the 10th Amendment, in which power, if it even belongs in government, is reserved to the states. Not because we don't care about our problems, but because we care. We know that when the federal government tries to solve these problems, it often makes them worse, not better. So let's return power back to the states. Conservatism means re-embracing true free enterprise. True free enterprise, which I believe in not because my parents were wealthy, not because I inherited millions of dollars, because I did not, but because as I walked onto the stage here today, I walked through the kitchen of this hotel, and I met people and shook the hands of people who are doing the jobs my parents once did. You know why they have a job? You know why they have a job? You know why my parents had a job? Because free enterprise works. Because someone created those jobs. And with those jobs, they are able to feed their families and raise them and buy homes and a better future. Free enterprise is the best economic system in the history of the world because it is the only system where you can make poor people richer and you don't have to make rich people poor. It means conservatism means believing in a strong national defense, not because we want war, but because we love peace. Because history has taught us a painful lesson, that weakness is the enemy of peace. That weakness invites violence. That weakness invites war. And so conservatives believe that the U.S. military should always be the most powerful one on earth because the world is a safer and better place when America is the strongest military in the world. Conservatives believe we stand by our allies, especially allies like Israel. They are the only pro-American, free enterprise democracy in the Middle East. Conservatives believe that we need to defeat radical Islam, not because we want war, but because ISIS and other radical Islamists are enemies of peace. And that's why we need a president under whom the best intelligence agencies in the world will find terrorists, and the best military in the world will destroy them. And if we capture them alive, a president that won't bring them to the United States, a president that won't grant them a court-appointed lawyer, a president that will send these terrorists where they belong, to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And conservatives believe we take care of our veterans because we have a sacred obligation to take care of them after they've taken care of us. It's something that's not happening now. And yes, conservatives believe in traditional values, not because we want to impose our views on anyone, but because to abandon those values would be to ignore our history. Americans are not the most generous people on earth because our laws make us generous. People do not contribute to charity in this country in record amounts because we have a tax break from it. We do so because this nation has been shaped by Judeo-Christian principles that teach us that we have an obligation to care for one another. And we believe in traditional values because without them, without the belief in an all-powerful God, then the very founding of this country was meaningless. It was founded on the principle that our rights come from God. If there is no God, then where do your rights come from other than what your leaders decide they are? You do not understand America, and you do not understand our history if you do not understand the role that our faith community has played in making us the greatest nation in the history of all mankind. So I am preaching to the proverbial choir on this issue. Why? Because I think there's a growing amount of confusion about what conservatism is. And it is time for us to understand that conservatism is not built on personalities. Conservatism is not simply built on how angry you might seem from time to time. Conservatism is built on a set of principles and ideas that our nation desperately needs at perhaps the most important moment in a generation. For over 200 years, this has been an exceptional country. I know this personally, as so do many of you, because for me, America is not just the country I was born in. It is the nation that literally changed the history of my family. But we have to remember that what made that possible was not an accident. America is not a special country by accident. It did not happen on its own. It happened because for over 200 years, each generation before us did what needed to be done. For over 2 centuries, each generation of Americans before us confronted and solved problems. They embraced opportunities, and Americans have never had it easy. This was a nation founded by declaring independence from the most powerful empire in the world. This was a nation that faced a divisive and bloody civil war, 2 great world wars, a long Cold War. The 1960s were difficult for this country. The civil rights movement divided us regionally. The Vietnam War divided us generationally. Americans have never had it easy. But each generation before us confronted their challenges and solved their problems. And that's why each generation before us left a country better off than the one that was left for them. My fellow conservatives, the time has come for this generation to do its part. The moment has arrived for us to do our part now. And the stakes could not be higher because the future of the greatest nation on earth is at stake. And I want to speak specifically to the younger people here today, because I know there's a lot of negativity out there. I know that times are difficult. I want you to know that I believe something with all my heart. I believe that today's young Americans are on the verge and have the chance to become the next greatest generation in American history. I believe that the 21st century is tailor-made for America. There are now hundreds of millions of people on this planet that a decade ago were starving, and now they want to buy things from you. They want to trade with you. They want to partner with you and collaborate with you. And these young Americans are the best collaborators in the history of mankind. These young Americans are the most technologically advanced people that have ever lived. On the campaign trail, unless you're under 25, no one knows how to use their camera phone. These young Americans have the chance to fulfill an incredible potential and destiny. But we have to give them a chance. And they won't have a chance if a Hillary Clinton or a Bernie Sanders is elected. And they won't have a chance. And they won't have a chance if the conservative movement is hijacked by someone who is not a conservative. And so, And so, I'm already over time, so let me close with this. Well, I got to answer questions. I get to answer questions now in a moment from Dana Bash. So let me close with this. I know that all the news today sounds bad. And by the way, for young Americans, know this. The one thing that's always true about history is that every generation believes the next generation is really messed up. I want you to believe and know if we do what needs to be done. I want you to know what history is going to say about you. I want you to know what history is going to say about us if we make the right choice now. It will say that this generation of Americans lived in the early years of this new century in a very difficult time. The world was changing, and we struggled to keep pace with it. And it will say the truth. We almost got it wrong. After 8 years of Barack Obama and one crazy election, we almost got it wrong. We came this close. But then we remembered who we were. Then we remembered what America was. Then we confronted our challenges and embraced our opportunities. And because we did what needed to be done in 2016, our children became the freest and most prosperous Americans that ever lived. Because we did what needed to be done, the American dream didn't just survive. It reached more people. It changed more lives than ever before. Because we did what needed to be done, the 21st century became greater than the 20th century. It became the greatest era in our history. It became a new American century. This is what we have the chance to do together, and our time to do it is now. Thank you. Thank you. And now, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I'm going to answer some questions from a journalist many of us respect very much. The CNN's chief political correspondent, Dana Bash, is here. So I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you, guys.
It's too bad. Oh, yeah, I forgot.
I'm sick. I don't want to get you sick.
Thank you for that.
Hold on.
That never gets old, does it?
My running mate right here.
Exactly. First of all, I just want to say that was definitely the first time I've ever been introduced by a presidential candidate. So that was good. I have a whole list of questions that I want to ask, but one thing that you were just talking about struck me that I want you to talk about, because I too came in through the back, through the kitchen, and that is definitely how you approach a lot of these events, and people don't really realize that. But for you, it is personal.
Yeah. I mean, my parents, this was the jobs they did. I always tell people my parents were incredibly successful people, because the American dream's not about how much money you make or how many buildings have your name on it. The American dream, I wasn't talking about anybody in particular, I'm just saying, it wasn't about, the American dream is about achieving happiness. When you become a firefighter, or a police officer, or a teacher, or a nurse, you know you're not going to become a billionaire. What you want is what my parents achieved. And what my parents achieved working as a bartender and a maid at a hotel, after arriving here with nothing, no education, no money, the first words my dad learned in English were, "I'm looking for a job." You know what my parents achieved? They owned a home in a safe and stable neighborhood. They retired with dignity, and they left all 4 of their children better off than themselves. That's the American dream.
Now, I know you weren't talking about any particular person when you just
Well, I probably was, but I mean, trying to be nice.
So let's go there. Donald Trump was supposed to be here this morning. He backed out. He instead was in Kansas. I sense that the crowd has an opinion on that. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the American Conservative Union, and so, I mean, it's usually reserved for conservatives. No, but this matters. I mean, look, either the ideas behind conservatism matter or they do not. And if they do not, then it's fine, but I believe they do. It is not enough to say vote for me because I'm angrier and over the top and I'm going to do and say things no one else is going to do. I get that anger and frustration, I really do. But let me tell you something. I've said this before. It is not a coincidence that there are people, a plethora of young conservative leaders in this country in their 40s and 50s. Myself, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Scott Walker, Susanna Martinez, Nikki Haley, Paul Ryan. Why? Why? Why are there so many young conservatives now serving our country? I'll tell you why. Because we grew up in the era of Reagan. And Ronald Reagan looked and acted nothing like Donald Trump. And look at the Democrats. Who is the young and up-and-coming Democrat? Bernie Sanders.
Senator, let me ask you a question about that, though. And I asked Ted Cruz about this week as well. You're stepping up your rhetoric big time against Donald Trump on the question of whether or not he is a true conservative. You started doing that at CNN's debate last week. You're calling him a con artist and a fraud. If you believe those things, why did you wait until February of 2016 to say so?
Well, a couple reasons why. Number one is because for much of this campaign, I've been fighting off other people attacking me, and so that takes a little bit of time too. And the other is, look, I didn't get into this to beat up on the other candidates. I really didn't. I had hoped that voters, if you had told me a year ago that the front runner at this stage in the Republican campaign would be a supporter of Planned Parenthood, who says he doesn't stand with Israel, who says that, who has a long record of supporting government-sponsored health care, I would say, on what planet would that be the Republican front runner? But it's happened, and I think we have to ask ourselves, why have we allowed that to happen? So I don't think any of us anticipated it.
And why is that? What is the question to that? Why have conservatives have voted and voted for him?
Well, I mean, part of the reason, and I think you're one of the reasons why, and I don't mean to take you on this, but I want to be clear, because I've now been sitting here for 5 minutes, and 2 of the 3 questions have been about Donald Trump. That's the reason why he keeps getting all this attention.
That's fair, but he is the front runner. That's fair, but he is the front runner, and you've been making your campaign about Donald Trump.
No, but even before he was the front runner, Donald would offend someone personally. He'd make fun of a disabled reporter or attack a woman journalist, and he would dominate news coverage. Of course he's going to get all this attention. It's fine. I'm not complaining about it. All I'm saying to you is the reason why we talk about it and the reason why a lot of this has happened is that the other night at the debate, I didn't do the count, but over half the questions I asked were somehow related to my opinion of Donald Trump. I'm more than happy to share with you my opinion on Donald Trump, but I'm running for president because I think this country needs to re-embrace the Constitution, this country needs to re-embrace free enterprise, and needs to re-embrace a strong national defense.
Okay. We have some questions from Twitter. People were submitting questions on Twitter, and Lisa Gariella asked this question. How are your children responding to your campaign? Do they understand how important and serious this is? And before you answer that question, I want to put my mom hat on for a second, because you're the proud father of 4. I'm the mother of a 4-year-old son. And I'm having trouble letting him watch the news because things have gotten so vulgar and so over the top that I don't want him to think that it's okay to act like that.
Right.
How do you, and I'm not alone, I know a lot of people have said that. How do you feel as a father and a presidential candidate about how low things have gone?
Well, I mean, no, but I'll tell you, this is related to the real question. I'm glad you asked it. My kids were on with me on the campaign trail a lot, from New Hampshire, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. Every day when I woke up, I was glad they were there, not just because they were my kids, but because I looked at them and it reminded me, this is what it's about. You're literally trying to decide what kind of country it will be like when they're my age, when they're a little younger, but doing things for the first time. I mentioned this in the speech. You know, God has blessed my family. He has protected our children. He's protected us. They've handled it extremely well. I don't think we've ever had a negative moment in the campaign with them. But that's because God has protected us and shielded us. I really believe that he's done that for us, and he's done that for other families as well. But for me, it is a daily reminder that what we are fighting for here ultimately is what we're deciding now in this election will decide what America looks like in 10 years. And yes, I think it is one of the things you asked me. I don't want us to have a president that we constantly have to be explaining to our kids, look, I know that's what the president did, but you shouldn't do that. I don't want that. We actually had a president like that not long ago. It was really bad.
But I'll leave that one alone. But just to follow up, but the rhetoric has been, I mean, I understand you're saying that you are trying to answer him and some of the things that he has been saying, but you know, I can't explain to my kid about you're talking about hands and things like that.
Well, look. I'll be more than happy to answer another Trump question. I don't know, Donald Trump, he might have grown up the way he did with a lot of money and going to boarding schools. I can tell you this, where I grew up, if someone keeps punching people in the face, eventually someone's gonna have to stand up and punch them back. So,
I want to ask another question from Twitter. This is on the Supreme Court from @SarahLeeAnn. Do you think President Obama should appoint a justice to SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, prior to the end of his term? Why or why not?
No, absolutely not. And the reason why is following. First of all, I agree with Joe Biden in 1992 when he said we should not be electing Supreme Court or nominating Supreme Court justices in an election year, much less in the 8th year of this president. First of all, the Supreme Court can function with 8 justices. The number 9 is set by Congress. I'm not advocating we do this, but if we wanted to change it to 8 or 7, we could. There's no magic number 9. Number 2, this president's completely unaccountable. He is going to be nominating someone to what is basically a lifetime appointment, and we can't hold it against him in an election. So we're going to have a debate in this country over this. There's going to be an election in November. God willing, we're going to nominate and elect a conservative, and that conservative will then appoint, I hope, someone more like Justice Scalia than the kind of nominees we've gotten out of this president.
So do you think that all candidates now, Republican and Democrat, should pledge not to nominate a Supreme Court justice in their last year of their term?
Sure, I would do that now, and that's, by the way, has been the practice for over 80 years in this country. The only time they want to bend the rules or change the rules if there's a Democrat in office, so they're all ignoring what Joe Biden said in 1992, but it goes back to the point I made. This is a lifetime appointment. You cannot, unless this person that gets appointed murders someone, it's going to be very difficult to remove them from the court. And so the bottom line is we should not be putting someone, when the balance of the court is at stake, in that position when in fact Barack Obama will not be held accountable for it by the electorate.
Okay. I have another question. It is about something Donald Trump said, but it's on an important issue, which is torture. You were standing next to him in the debate. You heard what he said on torture, and then he reversed himself, saying that he understands that the United States is bound by laws and treaties and will not order our military or other officials to violate those laws. What do you think of that, and what do you think is the most important position of a president on the issue of torture?
Well, I think the most important issue, the most important job of president is to be commander-in-chief. A commander-in-chief will never ask the armed forces of the United States to do something that would violate the rules of war, or quite frankly, the internal practices of our military. But I want to be clear about interrogation, okay? We have to understand that this is not about torture. No one here is asking for torture. But you cannot use the same interrogation techniques on a terrorist that you do on a criminal. Here's why. A criminal, when you are interrogating a criminal, what you are trying to do is gather evidence for a trial so you can convict him. When you are interrogating a terrorist, what you are trying to gather is information to prevent a future terrorist attack. It's not about evidence for trial. And I don't talk about interrogation techniques. You know why I don't talk about interrogation techniques? Because when you describe interrogation techniques, terrorists they do practice evading interrogation techniques. How to evade telling you the truth. So we are going to interrogate terrorists, but right now that's not even an issue. You know why? Because Barack Obama doesn't send them anywhere. He's releasing terrorists from Guantanamo. Who are we going to interrogate? When I'm president, if we capture a terrorist, they're going to Guantanamo, and we will find out everything they know.
Another Twitter question from Steve Klaus. He wants to know, how will your faith figure into your presidency?
Well, my faith is the biggest influence on my life. And by the way, I think that's something people should be proud of. I'm a Christian. I cannot impose my faith on anyone. My faith is the free gift of salvation that you have to willingly accept. But I can tell you, my faith teaches me this. My faith teaches me in order for me to serve the Lord, I have to serve others. It teaches me that I have to care for people that are hungry and for the less fortunate and for those among us who are facing difficult times. Now, Democrats would say the only way to care for people like that is through more government. The reason why I believe in free enterprise is because I know that free enterprise allows people who are struggling to find a better job and a better life. Does government have a role to play in a safety net? Yes, not as a way of life, not as a lifestyle, as a way to get people back on their feet so they can find a good job and never rely on government again. My faith influences me to believe that, and my faith influences me to believe that all human life, All human life is worthy of the protection of our laws.
A political question. This, in a week and a half, as you well know, is the Florida primary, a crucial test for your campaign. Governor John Kasich said that if he doesn't win his home state of Ohio, he'll drop out. What will you do if you don't win?
Well, I've never
Florida?
based my campaign on one state, but I can tell you this. We will win the state of Florida. We will beat Donald Trump there the way we beat Charlie Crist. I have experience at beating people who say who they are, who don't say who they truly are. I have experience at beating people who portray themselves to be one thing but are actually something else, and you're going to find that out on March 15th in Florida.
One person who is not going to be on the ballot is Jeb Bush. Mm-hmm. I know that the two of you have spoken. Have you asked him for his endorsement?
Yeah, I don't discuss private conversations with anyone.
Would you like to have his endorsement?
I would like to have as many endorsements as I can get because I want to unify the party, but I'm going to discuss private conversations. Suffice it to say that no matter what happens in a campaign, I said throughout the campaign repeatedly that I had tremendous admiration for Jeb Bush, that I believed he was the greatest governor in Florida history, although Rick Scott's a very good governor too, and that I will always have tremendous affection and respect for him, despite the fact that because of a weird quirk of fate, we ended up running for the same office at the same time. I did not run for president to stop Jeb Bush. I ran for president because I believe America's greatest days lie ahead if we do what needs to be done right now in 2016.
This is another question from Twitter from DToller13. To all candidates, best answer gets his vote.
Oh, okay. No pressure. Where does he live?
Well, he didn't say. Miami, no. What is your plan to unite the country as president, i.e. racial police trust?
Well, look, first of all, let's be clear. The police departments in this country are among the finest people in our country. I mean, they just are. The other day, we were reminded. In Virginia, a week ago, 3 police officers were shot. One of them was a Marine reservist. She was on her first day on the job and she died. So we have tremendous admiration and respect for our police officers, and I thank God every day for what they do for our families. I also think in this country, irrespective of police departments, putting aside the police department issue, yes, there are a significant number of Americans that live in majority-minority communities who feel like they're locked out of the American dream. And if a significant percentage of the American family feels like they're being left behind, we have an issue, we have to confront it. And here's how we're going to confront it. We're going to confront it by embracing free enterprise. It is the only economic model in the world where you can make people better off without pulling anyone else down. I believe free enterprise works because I've lived it. My parents would never have been able to achieve for our family what they achieved in America anywhere else on the planet. Because almost anywhere else in the world, your future is decided by whether or not your parents are the right people and are connected to the right people. Not in America. That's not who we've been. That's not who we're going to be. And I think that's the best for all Americans, irrespective of your background. In the end, all this hyphenation stuff, that's fine. But we're all Americans. And if I'm president of the United States, I will be a president for all Americans.
Just one final question. Just on a personal level, what has been the most surprising part of this campaign? I mean, it is grueling. Obviously, you're sitting here with the flu, right? So how have you embraced this in a way that maybe you didn't think you would?
Well, there's a lot of surprising parts about this campaign. I told you one of them. I never could have imagined that the front runner in a Republican nomination would be someone that refuses to stand with Israel, defends Planned Parenthood, you know, all these other positions that Donald Trump has taken. But that aside, here's the great part about it. I knew this already, but this campaign reminded me of this. America is not a government. America is a nation and people. America is the country where this very morning, people got up and went to work or opened their business or volunteered in the community. They're going out about their lives and doing great things, irrespective of who the president is going to be or not. Our government is messed up, but the American people are as great as they've ever been. What they need now are leaders that give them a chance. And this campaign has confirmed that. I was in South Carolina, and I went to a pregnancy crisis center. You've never heard about this place. It's not in any magazines. They don't get any movies made about them. There's no news articles. These people every day are saving lives. Young girls are coming into this pregnancy crisis center scared to death, thinking about ending an unborn life. And these people, through ministry and the Word of God and just loving them, are getting them to change their decisions. They are saving lives, literally. there are now people involved in this program whose lives were saved by this program. That's America.
Senator, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Washington.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.